This episode of the Managing Madrid Podcast is brought to you by Intercontinental San Francisco Hotel. They are proud sponsors of our show and even hosted our podcast live in San Francisco during preseason. Thank you to the Intercontinental for hosting us in a very comfortable space with great acoustics and a bunch of great Madridistas in attendance. So thank you to everyone all around. Tonight's episode is pretty jam-packed, so we're going to get right to it. It's a three-parter. So part one, Jose Perez and I preview the Almeria game. Part two, Siddharth, Ramsundar, and I, we go through three possible outcomes for Real Madrid's season in a bit of a season preview and a little bit of a different take. And then part three is a conversation that I had with Ray Hudson and Kevin Egan, two great friends who are amazing at what they do. Obviously, Ray Hudson needs no introduction, and Kev Egan doing so much amazing things in the media world. One of the people I really admire, one of the most confident and powerful and energetic presences I've ever seen in media, to be honest. And anytime I jump on a call with him, it's special because he just is so much fun to talk to that he just brings out the best in all of the guests. And it's just a really, really fun thing to do. So I always say yes to Kevin whenever he asks me to come on Sirius XM FC. And I uploaded a small clip, not the entire thing, obviously, but just a small clip of the conversation where we were talking about the work Florentino Perez has done and some other things. So stick around for part three as well. The timestamps are in the show notes, so zoom around as you wish. Enjoy your beverage of choice and kick back, relax, and let's get started with the voices of Derek Ray and Ray Hudson.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there, and worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
All right, hello and welcome to part one of the Managing Madrid Podcast on a Friday, joined by Jose Perez. We are trying to make this a Friday tradition, and so far we are at consecutive weeks, which means we're off to a good start with lots of momentum. So Jose Perez is here. Jose, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, hello, Kiyan. Hello, everyone. I still, as you can hear from this, I still have lost a bit of voice after yelling so much in the last PSV game, the one that they kind of won against Monaco in extra time. We yelled a lot in that stadium, so my voice is still a bit off, but that was worth it. That was a fun night.
You know, I didn't really truly understand the extent of your fandom for PSV until recently, because I think I saw you there at a couple games last season just through your social media posts, and I thought, oh, Jose is just checking out his local team. Why not? I would do the same if I had a local team. Actually, I don't. I don't go to any Toronto FC games, but. I was like, that's cool. But then I realized that you go to every game, you're a passionate fan, and you put notes. But listen, as much as I actually want to get more information out of you from that, we don't have time. We got to talk about Almeria. All right. Yes. So we got a game against Almeria coming up. It's a season opener. You and I are going to aim to do a lot of pregame podcasts, previews, and stuff like that. With all due respect, I think it's possible that this one might not be the most interesting opponent, but it is the opening match day. Almeria is located in the southeast of Spain in a beautiful region. Ewan McTeer will be on site for us for Managing Madrid this weekend, away to Almeria. And I'm wondering if you can just give us a little background check on them before we get into some of the tactical things. What do we need to know about Almeria?
Yes. So, first of all, it's just really fun to be back doing the scouting report. So, I mean, that's the nice thing about being back in season. So to start with Almeria, I mean, the story with them really starts in August 2019. They were taken over by Turki Al-Sheikh, who is the chairman of the board of directors of the Saudi General Entertainment Authority. So yes, Almeria is basically a Saudi-backed club, and they've been trying to put in investments into the club. One of the interesting things is that in the first 2 years, let's just say that club management was a bit impatient. They cycled through managers. They fired them right towards the end of the season when they saw that Almeria would not make direct promotion. So then they fired the managers there, and then you put in new managers right before the promotion playoffs. That was obviously not the best of ideas. So it didn't work out well for them in the first 2 years. They lost promotion playoffs both times. One of those managers, by the way, was Guti, who was coaching them throughout the 2019-2020 season. And he got fired right before the playoffs when it was clear that he was not going to make direct promotion. But finally, this one season, they finally stuck to one manager for a year, which in this case was Rubí. And they made it this time. They made it through direct promotion, first place in the league. They were the strongest team in the league. And that's really the quick version of Almeria history in the last 3 years.
How much do you think they're like? So obviously they did well in Segunda, very clearly. We know that now. How much does their playing style change after getting promoted, do you think? Do they stick to their identity and core values? Do they become more defensive? Like, how do you see that part of their games unfolding?
That's one of the big questions really this season for Almeria, because Almeria is going to go through something that we see many times with newly promoted teams. We've had a few of those cases, Rayo Vallecano, Huesca, teams that were very used to having the ball, to having most of the ball throughout the games and to having the initiative. And of course they were like the big teams in their division. And now these teams that were very proactive, very possession-based, are going to have to get used to having a lot less of the ball, to being the underdog, and have to be more reactive. And I mean, cases like Rayo Vallecano or like Huesca many times did not handle that transition well. And we'll have to see what happens in this case with Rubí. There's a good chance that he won't compromise, so he will keep using. So Almeria is a possession-based 4-3-3 team, and there's a good chance that they will and the most likely thing is that they will continue using that possession-based 4-3-3. They might try to perhaps be a bit more conservative in how they press and how they defend. So try to defend a bit deeper, a bit more compact. But other than that, especially in possession, I think they're going to try to do many of the things they were doing last year. So I wouldn't expect too much adjustment from Rubí.
So that's maybe their overall arching season. Does anything change specifically for Real Madrid, for the Real Madrid game this weekend?
Yes. So with regards to lineup, we would the story right now with Almeria, it's interesting because they've had a relatively quiet summer. So with no, this is not Premier League and Nottingham Forest. You cannot just go do 10 new expensive signings now that you're going into first division, because even though Almeria have the money, La Liga financial regulations do not allow them to. So even now they're having issues registering players, because actually, and it's interesting because right now what happened is that all of the players' wages, they got higher when they went from second to first division. I presume it was something in their contracts. And now Almeria overpassed their salary limit. So they're having issues selling players now, and they're only going to overcome it by selling their star striker, who is Nigerian Umar Sadiq. So that's the current story. But because of all that, they haven't been able to buy too many players. So the 11 that we're going to see this weekend against Real Madrid is going to be very similar to the one that they fielded last season. So it's going to be possession-based 4-3-3 with many of those names as far. So looking at the goalie position, it's going to be goalkeeper Fernando, who was with them last season. They just got Fernando Pacheco from Alaves, who's a fairly good keeper, but I think he's not going to start yet. They also got center back Babic, who's a signing from the Serbian league. He is probably, if I look at the 11, he's probably the only one of the new signings who's going to start the game. So it's Babic, Rodrigo Eli, who was also an Alaves player, but he came into Almeria in previous seasons. So their starting center-back pair is going to be Babic and Rodrigo Eli. Then the fullbacks, who tend to be very aggressive, are Akieme, who was a former Barcelona player, if I recall correctly, and Alejandro Pozo, who was a former Sevilla youth player. Again, very aggressive fullbacks. Then the central midfield is going to be, again, mostly the same as last season. One has to put attention on De La Hoz, who's their main defensive midfielder, the guy who recovers most of the balls, and Samu Costa, who just a promising young midfielder. Then, as far the interesting bits start coming in their front three, you have I think his name is Francisco Portillo, who is he's been a player who's made a bit of a career throughout the years in smaller Spanish teams. He had really interesting cameos in, like, he was the creative guy in the times of the Getafe of Jose Bordalas, and now he's ended up in Almeria, and he was one of the most prolific chance creators in the second division. So Portillo, who's the right winger, he's going to be the guy who's really in charge of chance creation in this team. And on the other wing, on the left wing, you have Ramazani, who is actually a former Manchester United youth player. So that's expected to be the starting lineup for now. The big doubt for Almeria is in the striker position, because their star striker, Umar Sadiq, is likely going to leave. He's just waiting for the sale. So we are wondering if he's going to play this weekend or not. He's barely had any preseason with the team because he's going to leave. So if he doesn't leave, then the substitute striker, Diego Sosa, who's had like a pretty solid, at least in second division, he had a pretty solid rate of goal scoring despite being the substitute. So that's currently how the lineup looks for Almeria. Guys to watch out. I mean, the reality is that the person to watch out for in Almeria was Umar Sadiq. He's the player. He's the kind of player who you wonder how was he still playing in second division, because he had the talent to be playing, I don't know, in say a top half Spanish side. He was really the main danger. If he plays, then yes, you gotta watch out, because he's a pretty complete striker. He's more technical than what he looks, but at least in the second division, he bullied everyone there physically, and he could act as a target man. So if Almeria is a very possession-based team, but if they were having issues, if they were being pressed and it was difficult for them to pass the ball out of there, they could just send the long ball to Umar Sadiq. So again, for the rest of the season, Almeria is going to have to learn to live without him. There is some chance that he might play against Real Madrid, and he would be the guy to watch out for if he plays.
So just as we wrap it up here, I think we have like a minute left before we have to move on. But the Sadiq bit of this is interesting to me, because this is a guy who scored 41 goals in the last 2 years in Segunda, and a player who, under Steven Gerrard at Rangers, just did not feature. And in fact, I think Gerrard basically cast him aside and canceled the loan deal and stuff. And now he's in this situation. And the most staggering thing of all this is that Almeria CEO 4 days ago said that Sadiq is going to be sold for 30 million or just under 30 million. That's a big number for them. Which makes me happy, because if they're going to lose a player like that, that's a pretty decent fee to come out of Segunda. And it's a solid number.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting that now, like, Almeria would normally have the money to retain a player like this, but La Liga regulations don't allow them to. So to actually raise their salary limit, they have to sell Sadiq. There's no other choice.
Yeah. All right, Jose, be interesting. We got the game coming up on Sunday. Obviously, we'll have the post-game coverage for you guys listening. And just wanted to say thanks, Jose, for this brief cameo. It was very informative, a lot of information in a small amount of time, and very efficient. So thank you for your time, Jose. Look forward to having you on next week again. Appreciate you.
Yep. Look forward to more scouting reports. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
All right, welcome to part 2 of the Managing Madrid podcast on this fine Friday. We are continuing full steam ahead with some content. And today we have Siddharth Ramsundar on. He hasn't been on, I think, possibly since the weekend of the whole Mbappe fiasco, where we had a four-man pod with Jose and Matt. Oh, actually, you were on the Chouameni emergency podcast, weren't you?
I was on the Chouameni, but
yeah.
Lest I remind everyone, I was also on the Man City Preview podcast before the second leg. That was my favorite. Those are the last 3 I've been on, everyone.
Those were 3 really, really big ratings ones too. So I think you were part of three huge podcasts. So we're bringing you back. You have a gimmick that you basically came up with, and I'm all for it. I have no idea what's in store for me. You have not told me any details. I'm just going to ask you, and we're going to go through it, and I'm going to be surprised by it. So we have come up with 3 outcomes. Is that correct, Sid?
Yes. I would like to vaguely talk about the 3 most likely outcomes for Real Madrid season. What do we think? Like 3, we flesh out what the season goes like, what it feels like, and what the endpoints are. Yes.
Okay. So then, am I correct? And I'm just gonna throw us into this discussion by asking, what is the first Real Madrid outcome for the season that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I actually want to talk about. I think what's interesting is the reason I framed it that way, 3 outcomes, is because in general, every team has a floor and a ceiling, right? You have if things go wrong, you have a floor that, things can't go worse than a certain point because your players are too good. You have a ceiling where if things go right and everything meshes, everyone ends up being really well. And then usually you have a middle ground. So I feel like you have worst case scenario, best case scenario. Last season was probably the best case scenario I've ever seen of any season watching any sport. But yeah, in general, teams end up between the 25th and 75th percentile, I feel like, of possible outcomes. If we're going statistically, you probably end up doing better than your worst case scenario and not as well as your best case scenario. So I'm going to assume that's the case this season. Now, I want to talk about why I think our floor for the worst case scenario out of those 3 outcomes. Actually, the first thing I wanted to talk about is why I think even the worst outcome possible is not that bad this season. I'm a little confident in this team in ways that I wasn't last season. And the main reason is our veterans. And, we've talked about our veterans before. But Kiyan, do you feel like these guys are I feel like they're smarter than ever. They seem to be, as far as with Pintus, especially last season, I thought we saw a throwback to the 3P era when we would end the season so fit. And on top of that, we already have the best players and they're so smart. And last season, we saw that take a turn where it added to our player development. And I just feel like Kroos, Modric, Benzema, the way they're just bringing everyone together, I feel like we have the best leadership in football right now.
So you're speaking intelligence also just at a higher level too, not just the players and on the field stuff. You're talking about competence at the board level, the managerial level, the staff, the coaching department, all that stuff, right?
Yes, and I think there's an arms race in football for knowledge. Every club now employs a lot of people to do a lot of things. Where I think we have an edge is that I think there's buy-in from 5-time Champions League winners that to a degree that we may not see at any other club. There's a lack of ego with these Champions League winners. I've never seen Benzema, Kroos, or Modric make the wrong decision in football. I've seen Ronaldo do it a lot. I've never seen these 3 do it, to give you a good example. And it's in the sense that
they're coming for you.
Just so collective.
They're all listening to what you just said. All the Ronaldo fans.
I just think it's a very collective minded leadership we have, where they know how to bring the best out of individuals in a way that benefits the team. And I just think our philosophy there, again, every other team also has the best players buying in, doing work around the clock, teaching younger guys what to do. Bayern Munich had this with Lewandowski, Muller, Neuer. Barcelona had this with PK, Busquets when Messi was around. However, it's very rare that it translates seamlessly to the point where the next generation of players comes through and you're still winning. And I don't see why that would go down, because we have more years with Rodrigo, Camavinga, Chouameni, and Vinicius. And really what I'm saying is I think our young guys give us a very high floor this season. And just because we haven't seen them play in a system that leads us to us winning doesn't mean they won't be valuable. I think we'll have a lot of games this season where we sub off our starting midfield 55, 60 minutes and win games. And I think we have an ability to approach games as a squad in a way that nobody has. It's such a good family environment. And I think that's what wins football games, like collective understanding and unity.
So I think what makes this era of veteran legends and leaders unique is that they're also very good at football still. I've seen in the past in different iterations of Real Madrid where you have the lingering legends stay and be leaders in the locker room, but they never aged well. I'm talking about like Fernando Hierro. Like, the last few years of his career, didn't age like even a quarter as well as Sergio Ramos did, for example. You look at Luka Modric and Karim Benzema, like you know better than anyone. You and I have discussed about how well they've aged and how the importance of them taking care of their bodies is such a unique thing relative to other footballers their age and the way that other footballers have aged. So I think what's unique about this era is that it's actually led by veterans and legends who are still not only just good, but the best in the world at what they're doing. And that's very, very, very incredible to see for players like Camavinga and Tchouaméni coming in. And so there's that. I agree with you that the floor is pretty high with this team. It's hard for it not to be. Like the worst case scenario of, like, for example, the Galacticos growing up, 2003, 2004 range was much worse than it is now because there was a lot of defensive deficiencies. The unity wasn't as high. The legends declined more steeply. You could, on any given night, you could probably have a bad loss. This one is a lot different because there's a lot of floor raisers in the team who are just really smart and good at football, and there's cohesion and unity in the team. And I think this goes back to the point about smart people at the board level, because it's not always throughout Real Madrid history where there's a clear sporting vision in place. I think our signings right now make sense on a tactical level, but also from a squad building and vision standpoint. And this is why I've said many times this summer, everyone's talking about Barcelona going to be better. I think that's true. I'm not going to debate that. But we're also forgetting that Real Madrid are better. Like the double winners from last season are better. Like, can we just acknowledge that fact for a second? Because we got Tchouaméni, Rudiger, and we have probably several players who are taking the leap who are going to have more playing time. I'm talking about Rodrigo, Camavinga, and it's a better team, and we can't discount that fact either. The other thing about Tchouaméni, Rudiger, and I'm sure you guys touched on this on the Tchouaméni emergency podcast, which I joined for like a few seconds, and that's it. But Tchouaméni is a character signing. Rudiger is a character signing. This is just more character and more leadership infused into the team now. People who are not going to disrupt the locker room. It's just more people who are just going to mesh. So I think that the intelligence all around and the floor, the floor of this team, I agree with you on both of those points for sure.
Yeah, and to build off some things you said, firstly, Barcelona, they're really good, and they definitely had a great season as far as a great off season as far as players go, and provided they can register them all, which they can, because someone who works with the league and someone works in a company in the league who conducts VAR reviews and works with the referees is funding their signings apparently, which is very interesting and
completely clean and
sure
legal. It's very ethical.
Yeah, I'm
everything
sure
that's happening there.
Yeah, and honestly, the thing is, Kiyan, most people don't understand illegal things happen all the time under people's noses. However, and I just tweeted about this before we started, it's usually not this blatant. Like, you can't just, if someone's tweeting about it the day it happens, you guys screwed up. Like, you guys are probably going to get in trouble with someone. And, I was actually kind of looking forward to a good Barcelona, but not good enough to beat us, Barcelona, this season. And, strengthen La Liga, but we'd still be the best. And I still think we will be the best. However, this brings me into my season predictions. Now, I think the ceiling of our season, there's one man who this team depends on more than anyone else. He's a superhero in my eyes now, and that's Karim Benzema. And, this guy, my respect for Benzema, Kiyan, is at a level that, few people in football history or sports history have. I respect him like I respect Tom Brady at this point. And in the sense of he's the GOAT of his sport, but in the sense that the way you're revolutionizing longevity is just breaking the game. You clearly understand reality better than other people. So I think Benzema, if he can play most of the season, we are set. Like, our midfield will rotate, will take care of itself. Rudiger will fix any complacency in the back line. and Vasquez, Carvajal will double up and do their job. However, there's no replacing him, and it's because, my experience from the Zidane years and what I remember is just from everything I've seen, I think all the off-pitch work doesn't have an endpoint if Benzema isn't there. However, if there's a stretch without him, I expect the team to actually get much better without him. There's just more talent than previous times. However, I think our season will depend on Benzema, but I expect our midfield, defense, goalkeeper, and every other position to grow and outperform expectations just like last season.
So when we're talking about floors and ceilings and stuff, the only way I would be concerned about the floor is if something happens to Benzema. Because the drop-off from him into who's next is going to be pretty dramatic. I think there are going to be players in the team who can do some of the link-up stuff. Rodrigo can do that. I think Hazard can do some of that. Asensio could do some of that. It's the scoring aspect that I'm worried about. And so, God forbid, if something happens to Benzema, that's, I think, where the floor could get diminished a little bit. And by floor, I don't mean like we're going to be out of the Champions League spots in La Liga or creep out of third place even. But it could be the difference between a final appearance in the Champions League and a round of 16 appearance if you don't have Benzema. That's where I think the floor, I think, can be questioned, Sid.
I also think in the league, I would add, I actually think the league where we need Benzema, and the first thing I tweeted is only one man can save us now, and it's him after seeing that Barcelona La Liga corruption thing. And it's because it's true in the sense that, watch his finish against Man City, or just half his finishes throughout the season. Those are things that few players in history in their prime could replicate, let alone anyone that we sign who exists right now. I'm saying you look at time, and it's very rare for someone to, just casually bang in a left-footed volley off the post from outside the box against Man City. Just first shot you get, you're not really warmed up, your team's barely playing, but for you, you're sharp. You hit first touch you get, it goes into the goal. And I think that expertise, I'll say, really, that's where my unique understanding I want to bring in, that just from what I'm seeing, from when I combine my understanding of health with what I'm seeing on the pitch, just the age at which he's changed, it's just not possible without a certain command over your body, is my opinion. And especially because when you consider he returned to the national team and then he had the season, he didn't have the same offseason he was used to for 3 years, from 30 to 33, where he was already getting better. Then he plays for France. He's playing the Nations League, and he's still playing all season, and he's better than ever because now he has Vinicius. So I think from that standpoint, I really think this man is a superhero, and I really think he can do it. And I already think last season was one of the greatest achievements in football history. I don't think Cristiano would have been able to do what Benzema did for us. I'm really clear on that because his game understanding is so perfect as a veteran, while he's also able to bring everything he did as a young guy. And that's where I think I would be concerned if he gets injured. However, the only problem here is that he's probably going to do well in the World Cup, and that's probably going to affect us. But I actually think he's going to have a great World Cup. He's going to come back in January. Maybe there's a week or 10 days where we're nervous, and then we're back to vintage Benzema, and I think he's going to bang in the goals, man. That's my honest gut feeling.
I don't disagree. I had a whole Benzema segment. Oman and I had a whole Benzema segment on the post-game show for the Frankfurt game. I had one that was on social media today. There's a lot of just Benzema praise going around, and it's all absolutely deserved. What is outcome? So the first outcome was basically it's not a specific outcome, but it was just basically, this team is pretty good.
Something happened to Benzema. Let's just say something happens that's not happened in previous seasons to Benzema. That's the worst case scenario. Yeah, for sure. Best case scenario, or I'd say honestly, I think the most likely outcome though is Benzema continues on the trajectory he's been at, and then there's the middle outcome, Kiyan. What last season? What do you think of the games Benzema missed last season?
The obvious one was the Clásico, but I also think there were nuances to that game that I think sometimes gets missed when we have a dialogue about, well, this is the example of what happens when Benzema doesn't play. That to me was worst case scenario because Ancelotti tried something I think he would have never have tried if the league wasn't wrapped up at that point, and that was he put Modric as a false nine, and people were lost. I don't think he'll do that again, and so I don't know if that's the correct sample size of our game plan without Benzema. And I think if you just replace him with Rodrigo as a false nine, Vinicius on the left, with Fede on the right, or whoever, I would wager it's probably not that bad. I just
remember when we beat Real Sociedad with Luka Jovic assisting Vinny, and I thought we had the backup.
Yeah, that was a very encouraging night for us and Jovic fans and Jovic, but that we know history. After that, the rest is history. But yeah, I do think the Clásico kind of taints a little bit our vision of what we think the team looks like without Benzema. Having said that, obviously it's a drop off for whoever it is, but I don't know if it's as that bad. But I guess my concern would be if it's for a prolonged stretch, like you might be able to see fill-ins from Rodrigo or whoever from game to game, certain opponents. But if it's for a prolonged stretch to sustain it, it would be tough for me to see. And that's where I think the concern kicks in if something happens to him. But I don't know. I feel like maybe I don't want to speak it into existence. So that's why I get.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. Like, just like the Man City second leg, I'm speaking this Benzema great season in existence. I think I'll put it this way, Kiyan, even if we wanted to, I don't think we can stop the man. Like, he's like that kind of guy. Like, we could say anything we want about him, and he's just fighting. Like, the way he lives, it's incredible. It's not possible to just grow this much, as we keep saying. And I'll add one more thing. I think the Clásico is the key to understanding our season as a whole, because, we're honestly, a lot of the year we're in tactical shambles, and then as time goes on, we're clearly demonstrating a better understanding. But I feel like that specifically came after the Clásico. Like, that Ancelotti really understood what works and doesn't. And if people, like, first leg against City, we were missing Casemiro. Second leg, we played incredible block defense for a lot of stretches. And against Liverpool, I still think we kind of flummoxed Liverpool. I think they came in with their usual plan, and it was just so predictable to us that they realized by the end. Like, the smartest Liverpool fan I know, Grace Robertson, said Liverpool did not attack well that night. However, they tried everything they normally do, and it still didn't come off, partly because of Courtois. But I think really we learned from Barcelona. And not only did we learn from Barcelona, after we learned from Barcelona, our young guys had learned from Barcelona. And our young guys got more confident. And once we put those performances out, everyone got better. So people talk about Real Madrid looking at the expected goals and assists. I understand. But you have to understand, at some point, the team was not the same. It was not the same team that started the season. It was not the same team that was there before the Clásico. And if that team still exists, which I honestly know they do, the culture is even better. Rudiger is the kind of guy who reinforces it. We'll be good. And, the only thing I'm worried about is if Ancelotti actually doesn't rotate properly, which I still trust him because of Pintus. It's just more so, I hope he gets it right there.
The Pintus thing, we've had a whole segment on. It's been insane, the work he's done. And yeah, so those are all really interesting points. And I think also just going back to the Liverpool game really quickly, because, we've discussed it to death over the past few months and after the game. But the Liverpool thing also, I thought we were the better team. I thought I didn't feel that threatened by their attacks. And when they did get through, was Courtois brilliance. That game also could have been 2 or 3-0 in our favor. If a call goes our way or a ball goes, ball bounces our way, but that's besides the point. Also, I think part of the reason why I'm also optimistic of that of this next season is that I also think we're going to be better defensively, and so if we can rely less on heroics from Courtois and just leave that as the ultimate last resort and not rely on it more, I think we'll be in a good spot. Let's get to outcome number 2, Sid. Though, what is outcome number 2 for you?
Yeah, I guess outcome number 2, since the way we're doing it is really the best outcome, the worst outcome, and the median one. I think there's an outcome, and I don't want to speak it into existence, but there's an outcome where we're okay in the league, where we take time to get going. People missing things means Barcelona might, and there's an outcome where Barcelona simultaneously do well in the league. I wouldn't call it this outcome 2 because I think I made it clear. I think the outcome where Benzema's fit and we're good is actually 50% likely for me. And so the outcomes 2 and 3 are more covering the other, not even 50% for me, honestly. But there's an outcome where the collective wear and tear is enough on our players, because the reality is, since we have, in my opinion, some of the best in the world, they are going to do well in Qatar. It's the sad reality. They will do well at the World Cup. Yes, Toni Kroos will be fit. I think that's underrated that he's not going to the World Cup. He's going to be tactically, mentally fresh. And honestly, Kroos, when he's fresh, it is a pretty big difference in my experience. Over the years, I'm sure you've noticed, he just has more energy, plays with a little more thrust. Whereas when he's not fresh, you can take him out of the game easier. And yeah, however, outside Kroos, yeah, we're gonna have a lot of guys playing well at the World Cup. I think Benzema could win the World Cup, honestly, or I think Casemiro and Vinicius could also win the World Cup. It's quite reasonable that one of those two are in the final, if not both. And from that standpoint, if our players are so good that a 14-15 style season to some degree, I don't think the same thing will ever be repeated. Our depth was garbage that year, and what we have now is so much better. But we could finish second in the league and not go that far in the Champions League, and that's a possibility, because I think if there's one thing Barcelona have on us with the way their squad is built, I think they will destroy smaller teams better than us. I think they will wreck the 15 through 20 and 10 through 20. They will wreck better than us, because that's how good Xavi and that whole.
Yeah, sorry, and that's been proven and been pretty common since I've been born. Like, I've been a Real Madrid fan. Like, they'll beat up and then they'll be more consistent in those games. It's possible.
Yeah, and we saw glimpses of that last season, and the key for them is Pedri, really, and now they have Lewandowski. But those two, if they're healthy, I feel like they pretty much will smother smaller teams. And we're not going to have that quite, but again, it'll come down to Rodrigo too. There is a scenario. The absolute best case scenario is that all our young guys make the leap and we repeat what we did last year. Back to back Champions League. That's really what I'm not that convinced we can't repeat the Champions League. That's the thing. Benzema stays fit. We still have the most Champions League experience in Europe. What are your thoughts, Kiyan?
Okay,
does that feel like a little more likely to you?
So I have some thoughts on the World Cup point in particular, in that that's another look, that all these points and outcomes are connected, right? So another way that the floor of this team could go down is if something disastrous happens to the World Cup. By the way, as much as I don't really care for this French national team, like in terms of not questioning their talent or anything, I'm not that fond of them as I was during like the Zinedine Zidane era or whatever. But if I could definitely get behind Karim Benzema lifting the World Cup trophy and just really putting so many things to bed, any people who doubt him at this point, I would love to see that. But I agree with you that I think it's going to be crucial. It's a huge World Cup for a lot of our players. Every single player that we're sending there has a point to prove. For that reason, I also think this could be a huge Toni Kroos year. And what we've seen from him against Frankfurt preseason, he's been just lights out good. He is an incredible player. And if he also just does not go to the World Cup, we're going to rely on him quite a bit, I think, towards the back end of the season in particular. And I also would say Camavinga for that reason. Assuming he doesn't get into the French national team, him and Kroos, I think, are going to be huge. And I think that matters, because I think a lot of the players who are not going to be in the World Cup, or if they bounce early, or if they're just on the fringes or not playing much, they're going to be important, I would guess, on the second half of the season. And I think Camavinga and Kroos will be important in the second half for that reason. And I would say the World Cup doesn't necessarily scare me as it would in 2018. 2018 was disastrous for a variety of reasons. Modric playing 8 million minutes. If anything, if someone comes back out of form from the World Cup, like let's say if Militao comes back out of form for the World Cup, we have Rudiger now. If Casemiro comes out of form from the World Cup, we have Tchouaméni. Or out of form or injured, take your pick, whatever the scenario is. That pretty much, you can go down the list with all of our midfielders and center defenders. It's a different case, obviously, for the attack. But if, given the fact that we have so much depth in those positions, I feel okay about it. But certainly the World Cup is definitely a little wrinkle and a little hurdle and an obstacle that we're going to have to navigate, as will any other big club in the world sending players. So it's not a problem that's unique to ourselves. But that's the point, I think, that out of all things you said, that one stood out to me the most. And I think Kroos and Camavinga, I think, will be important in the back end of the season.
Yeah, and like you said, just to add, everyone else has to deal with this. I still believe we'll deal with it the best. It's just, you cannot, at the end of the day, if you are the best and you deal with the best, it means you'll play the most games. It's just the reality. You'll make it farther in the World Cup. And that means the probability just tilts a little against you relative to someone who just plays less games. However, I think we'll handle it the best. These guys know how to get, Draymond Green said after the Golden State Warriors won the NBA Finals that the more experience, and I think the Real Madrid have an element of this because the Madrid and the Warriors are very similar in the way they came back out of nowhere and won this year for me, and with their experienced vets and against this new young in fashion team. And I think he was saying how like the opposition when they're younger, they just don't know how you should like not sleep in the same room as your family the night before a game. Just simple things that like allow you to perform way better. And I think, it sounds crazy, but these real simple things, I think, our stars have picked up on way more. I think Modric, especially after the pandemic, has picked up on a lot more ways to keep himself young. Modric picked it up 2020, whereas Benzema did 2018. That's the main reason I'm more confident about this World Cup.
We got to wrap it up soon, so I want to get to outcome number 3. I'm assuming this is the outcome where it's just going to be lights out historic season, right?
Yeah. Or just the one I was saying that the most likely outcome, in my opinion, I think we're going to have a historic season. I think, because the thing, when you get these off-pitch details right, they transcend just one season. That's really what it comes down to. It's not a process that helps you just tomorrow. It helps you next season, the year after. It lets you stay good for long. And we've just gotten people don't realize how much we were deprived of talent in the previous years and how our vets just kept us going. And they should have burned out. And they like so many games in Zidane when we had 56 injuries the year before where we just passed it around and somehow found a way through eventually. The games were crazy to watch. I'm sure you remember, like, you didn't know what was going to happen, but somewhere the goal would come because of Benzema. And it was a lot of passing through blocks and like not having players to break down blocks, but still somehow winning. Like, we had 56 injuries and we were not that far from winning La Liga, which is crazy to me. And that is why I'm actually confident going into this season. This is like, and I felt this about our players before the pandemic. It's just when the pandemic happened and Hazard got hurt, I just couldn't feel it. I almost like was blinded to how much good work we've already done inside the culture that's allowing us to even stay afloat, like have an 89-point season or 87-point league season with 120 goal scorer, right, under Zidane. Like, those sort of things to me were already outsized achievements given our talent. So now that we have the talent, I just expect it to continue. And I hope Courtois and Benzema can stay on top, man.
That so the one we did our annual roundtable predictions, and I without fail, I think every time we've done this roundtable, I've always basically predicted the treble. I go high I always assume Real Madrid will win the Champions League and La Liga. That's just the way I've been kind of ingrained because I just know every year, no matter what, we'll always have that as our ceiling, no matter what. And this year I learned not to crown us champions of Copa del Rey. I just assume now we'll crash out in the round of 16 of Copa del Rey and I'm at peace with it now. I just accept it. But I do think our ceiling is pretty high. I really do. It's insane to me that we would not be favorites in the Champions League again. Not that we weren't favorites at all last year. No one even talked about us. But I think if people make that mistake again this year, like really, really shame on them. And I think I've already seen some pundits pick, like there's some British pundits pick their favorites, and I think Real Madrid or neither a Real Madrid player nor the Real Madrid team itself was in any of their conversations or predictions. It may happen again, but I think our ceiling's pretty high, Sid. So the summary of all this is that the ceiling is high and the floor is high, which is not a bad place to be. And the only way I think it could be super disastrous is if an injury happens, really, God forbid. And but other than that, I think the team is in a really good spot. I'm pretty happy with the vision. I'm pretty happy with the people in charge. And yeah, I could strengthen the team if I wanted to. And I think the club has that feeling as well. But I really liked a quote today, Sid, by Jurgen Klopp, where he was asked about if they're going to get a midfield, and he said, "Look, we've tried, we've had conversations, it didn't work out, but we're not going to sign anyone just for the sake of signing anyone." And I think that's where Real Madrid stand right now on the backup to Benzema, right winger, right back. That's where they stand on it, and I think it's the reason I like that approach is because we've been handcuffed in the past signing players for the sake of it, like the Hazards, like the Jovic's, etc. Bale's contract was a nightmare to get off of. And also just Liverpool won't be in a situation 3, 4, 5 years from now where they're like handcuffed to a big contract of a player they don't want that didn't work out because they forced a signing this year. And I think it's a sound approach. I think that's a solid approach. It's a smart approach. And I think I like the fact that we're in that situation right now where we're going to take advantage of certain market opportunities, but if there isn't one, we're not going to handcuff ourselves. So I'd say...
and just to add, I think Hazard and Jovic were actually great players when we signed them. I just think we got unlucky. Honestly, I think and I just think we're getting better and better at just deciding, all right, we're only going to sign him if he'll succeed no matter the environment now, you know?
Yeah, I agree. If you I put myself in the Hazard transfer when it happened, and he was one of the best players in the Premier League, and we needed offensive production outside of Benzema, and Vinicius wasn't scoring, but he was breaking lines. There is definitely counter arguments to that in terms of maybe he wasn't a great fit with Vinicius because who was already had a really good season as a left wing breakout star but wasn't scoring. There are counter arguments, sure, but I mean Jovic was a beast at Frankfurt, and we've signed players on much less sample sizes. The fee was a little bit high with Jovic, but at that time it was a good signing, and it didn't work out for various reasons we've discussed. But Sid, 3 outcomes in the books, in the bag. We got to bring you on more often, so we'll talk here about more gimmicks as the season progresses. Thank you for your time, my friend. Everyone stick around for part 3. But yeah, thanks, Sid. It was a pleasure as always.
Of course, man. Catch you later.
But tell me, Kiyan, how much credit to you and the Madridistas give to the man at the top of the ship? And I'm not talking about Carlo Ancelotti or any of the previous coaches either. The man that has overseen this renaissance of... say a renaissance when it's Real Madrid, that's hardly appropriate, but the rebuilding and the restructuring of Real Madrid under Florentino Perez, a man who has certainly received plenty of criticism in the past, but my lord, what a visionary of a man. Now, I don't know, I have no idea, Kiyan, how you stand on this point, whether you're a fan or a critic of the man, but what he has produced under his guidance, under his vision of a brand new stadium, basically, totally rebuilt team, completely rebuilding a back line that consisted of some of the greatest footballers that the world has ever seen. And they're still going onwards and upwards like a bottle rocket. Florentino Perez, Kiyan, give us the side view.
Well, to your question of whether I'm a critic or a fan, I'm definitely a fan. And I think now no one is without their flaws, and certainly he will make mistakes. But I think sometimes, Ray, you don't really see how good and competent someone is and how much of a visionary they are until you see some of the things that are happening at other clubs.
That's
and,
right.
You know, with just the fact that with the way Real Madrid navigated the pandemic financially under his guidance was really admirable. I mean, they somehow came out of this in the black, and they were smart about it. And you look at the future and you look at the fact that Real Madrid just won a Champions League title, and they've won so many over the past decade. And it almost doesn't, rather than it feeling like the closure of a chapter, it feels like actually something new is brewing. And that's a really weird thing to say when you have a team like with Modric and Kroos and Marcelo obviously moving on. Benzema's older. But their investment in the youth and the way they've set up for the future, and not only that, I think there's going to be more coming. A lot of people I think who are critical of Florentino Ray are people who are criticizing the fact that he hasn't signed many superstars, and anyone to back up Benzema. Which, by the way, like who is going to back up Benzema anyway? No. Like so that's a whole different debate. But the fact that the renovation of the stadium will be finished next season, and the amount of money and revenue that's going to bring in, is going to completely change the game and allow Real Madrid to also make some big signings in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. So he's a visionary. There's no doubt about it, Ray. All right, before we wrap it up, I wanted to give a shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, specifically to our $10 plus patrons who not only get guaranteed responses to their questions, but also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Wei Pairing, Wamik Jamal, Umar Mahadi, Tyler Simon, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tariq Goktas, Taleb Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sujaiwani, Sumanchu Singh, Shivam Tiwari, Sherry Soriol, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil, Shabaz Sharapov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samuli Justin, Samir Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasi Kumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Odayafari, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Zapatero Zubiare, Nicholas Moeller, Scroll, Nick Ribeiro, Nelson Mazariego, Muxi Thengal, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Matthew Atkins, Martin Ridman, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jeff Thurston, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Rantakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Christian Toft, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Armin Gashi, Armando L, Anton Rudenko, Anirudh Singh, Alexis Ceniceros, Al, Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Varun, Ramtin Mahrur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. Love you guys so much.